Welcome to Future Fit Leadership, a podcast for emerging, experienced and executive leaders to build community, grow capability and future focus their career pathways. There has been a global shift in how we lead people. Traditional models are being challenged and our workplaces are dynamically adapting. We know the static paradigm of the industrial era simply doesn't work for today's knowledge economy. But we don't yet know what the new paradigm is exactly. So let's find out. In this podcast, you will hear and connect with leaders, CEOs and visionaries who are challenging the status quo and sharing their future-ready strategies. No matter where you are on your leadership journey, this podcast will give you practical ideas and actionable tools to break open our assumptions of how work works. Future Fit Leadership is your place for bite-sized learning for executives hungry to make a change.
Future Fit Leadership acknowledge traditional custodians of the land on which we record this podcast, and we pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging. We extend that respect to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people.
Hello and welcome to Future Fit Leadership. I'm your host, Sadhna Smiles, and wherever you are listening to this podcast, I hope you are well. Today, I want to talk about wellness because wellness has become a priority for many of us in this post-COVID world, and we are more conscious about our health than ever before. And with the rise of things like the hybrid world of work, wellness is becoming a critical organisational pillar. We all know that our health is the most important asset, and without this, we really have nothing. However, the question I have is, are we paying the right type of attention to our health? Consider the stress levels of leaders today. How often do you feel tired? Do you have the energy to exercise? You go on leave, and by the time you actually start to relax, it's time to come home. How many of us actually do switch off when we are on leave? Because let's face it, disconnecting is difficult. And it's almost as if we suffer FOMO when we are away from the business. Will the business really fall apart if we unplug for a few weeks? I don't know how many times I've been in the lounge where executives are still connected to emails, calls, messaging with their family sitting around them. And the usual line I hear is, "Yep, mate, yes, mate, I'm on leave, but I'm still checking in from time to time." Because again, as I say, the world will fall apart if we don't. Then, of course, there are the excuses. And I have to confess, I am the queen of these. I can find an excuse not to go to the gym so easily. And then the flip side, when I've been consistently for a period of time, I get obsessed with going. More so when I start to see results or I have a special event on. Yo-yo diets, fat freezing, Jenny Craig, and everything in between, I think most of us have tried. I hate to think how much money I have spent on trying to find that one thing that's going to make it easy for me to be healthy. In fact, notice how much of this is advertised in your social media feeds. There is now a billion-dollar industry attached to health and well-being. And really, when it comes down to it in the end, it's what I put in my mouth, how much I move my body, and how I rest and activate my mind. We are corporate athletes, and yes, we train hard, we play hard, but we also need to find the time to rest. Stress actually reduces your lifespan. It is not a award that we're going to get because we've had the most amount of stress in our life. It exhausts you. It creates anxiety. You have sleepless nights. How many of us currently listening to this are suffering from sleep deprivation? Trust me, there is no extra income for stress. I can speak from experience. I got to a point where the stress I was under was making me sick, literally sick. I ended up with an autoimmune issue that I now have to manage for the rest of my life. I can't afford to be lazy about my health anymore. However, the lesson I learned was it wasn't about the extremes. going crazy and going to the gym every day, weighing my food, constantly being on the diet. I have done this from time to time, but more so, it was about everything in moderation and recognizing when my body was under pressure or stress and using the right tools to navigate this period of time. We assess how well or how profitable our businesses are on a regular basis. And as wellness becomes part of our business pillars, it needs to be more around meditation, yoga, retreats, time off. And we need to start to review the wellness of our leaders and our people, just as we review the profitability of our business. Burnout and stress is commonplace today, and no one can do their best work if they lack energy and motivation and are doing it under duress. Wellness is important. Your health is the most important asset you have. And I don't know about you, but I want to make sure that I live a long, healthy life. I don't want to retire in my mid-60s and then die of a heart attack or a stroke because I haven't looked after myself. And part of that is that we need to have the discipline around healthy habits, the food we drink, the alcohol we consume, how much exercise we do, and how we take care of our mind, emotions, and body. And for many of us, including me, I can from time to time be very undisciplined about my health. So to help us get some help with this and understanding, I reached out to someone that I have worked with before, and I call him Dr. Matt from the Alchemic Way. And he's here to talk to us about the 6 healthy habits that leaders should have. Hello, Matt, or Dr. Matt, as I call you. Welcome to Future Fit Leadership. Wonderful to have you on the podcast. How are you?
I'm really well, thank you, Sadhana. Thank you so much for having me as a guest. I'm super chuffed.
Oh, I'm really excited about this conversation because I think our listeners will get a lot out of it. But before I do, I have to say that I'm loving the background. You've recently moved into country Victoria. How are you loving the move?
It's been quite incredible. I'm a pretty urban dweller for most of my life. So the furthest I'd moved was down to the Mornington Peninsula for the last couple of years. And even that felt a little urban still where we were, but this is quite different. So yeah, we've sort of landed on 5 acres of bush, and I'm getting into the thrills and spills of using chainsaws to cut firewood and carting stuff around the property. It's been quite a contrast, but loving.
Oh my goodness. Well, I'm going to have to come up for a visit at some point. 5 acres sounds amazing. But Matt, we're talking about the 6 healthy habits that leaders should have. And there's a whole range of stuff that we're going to share with our leaders today. But I want to start by asking you to give our listeners some of a background of who you are.
Yes, certainly. So I'm a doctor of traditional Chinese medicine. I'm a registered acupuncturist, and I also work with a method of applied kinesiology called total body modification. This is a niche healing method that came in from the United States, founded by a gentleman called Dr. Viktor Frankl in the 1970s. And he was a chiropractor who combined principles of chiropractic philosophy, traditional Chinese medicine, energetics, nutrition and wellness, naturopathic type things, the building blocks that we put in matter, and a rather left of center method known as radionics, revolving around electromagnetic harmonization, energy field harmonization.
Right. And what made you get into this part of the world as such? Because, you know, in my intro, I talk about how wellness has become $1 billion industry, really. And it's the latest buzzword. But you've been doing this for a very long time. What made you get into it?
I had an interest in Eastern philosophy and martial arts, and I owned a health clinic up in Ormond in Melbourne some years back that was founded with an old partner of mine. And we started from the ground up in building that business. And at the time, I was working more in an administrative role, coming out of a background in 5-star hotels, and transitioned across into healing as a segue into really, I think, finding a calling for me about the ultimate act of service for me as a love language. So had an interest in Eastern philosophy, and acupuncture and Chinese medicine was a lovely extension from that. So that was the start of the journey.
How do you define wellness today? Because it is so important, and it's something we probably don't prioritize because, I'm too busy to go to the gym, and, I travel, so it's really hard for me to follow a diet, and, I sleep in different beds, so it's really hard for me to get a good night's sleep. These are the I've used them myself. These are things I tell myself all the time. But
Me too. If it's any consolation, me too.
we all do it, right? But how would you define wellness for where we are today post-COVID?
I think really it's a great question. And I think that wellness really would be a different word to almost every individual that you ask to define it. I think provided you're shifting the needle more towards orientating towards a way of life that is conducive to health and healing rather than one that is destructive to that. And no doubt we'll get into some finer points around this throughout the podcast. But I think wellness really is just a mindset of waking up and wanting to be well. Doesn't mean you have to be leaping out of your skin, but it also, I think, definitely shifts that away from a state of dis-ease, not necessarily disease, if I could qualify the two terms there, but dis-ease. So yeah, there's so many different paths that lead to Rome with that. And, please, just as a caveat, I'm a single individual with some clinical experience, and I'd love just to put out there for the audience that what I'm offering is a truth. It's not the truth, and your mileage may vary with some of the points that we cover. My strong suggestion is, please, if you have concerns around your health, seek help from a registered professional. Ideally, your family doctor is a great place to start, just to get a baseline of where you're at. The beautiful thing in Australia and many developed countries is, provided one has the capacity to get to them, we have a plethora of different healings available. Chinese medicine, naturopathy, chiropractic, osteopathy. I could throw a stick at tens of these sorts of things. No one thing is better than another, and nor is the information that I'd love to share with people today through our chat. But it's just to be mindful that you can do some reasonably simple things that help you feel better each day. And at the end of the day, isn't that the game?
Well, it's so true, because I think our body has a way of telling us when something is not quite right. 99% of the time we ignore it. I've done it, ignore till it gets to the point where your body goes, you can't ignore me anymore because I'm going to take a drastic turn here and really stop you in your tracks so that you pay attention. But I've also always mixed, the medicine the doctor gives me as such. So, I'll go and see my GP who I've been to see for, 20 years or so. So I have a lot of trust and faith in them. But I also seek alternative medicine as well. So I'm one of these weird people that do the mixture, and I never know which one's going to work, but I kind of figure if I'm putting both things into my body or having a change of lifestyle, then one of them surely is going to make a difference, isn't it?
Cover all bases.
Yeah, cover all bases. What are you seeing? And I know you work with a lot of leaders in your business today, but what are you seeing as the key issues facing leaders today around their health and wellness?
Oh, look, I think certainly coming out of COVID, what really, really amped up as a very important highlight was mental health. It's one thing about the vehicle that we get around in, but the state of mind that we use to control, govern, and relate to that vehicle, the body, so to speak, has such a deep impact. And they're certainly in Chinese medicine and many of the complementary therapies, it's inexorably linked. You can't separate mind from body and spirit. They're all one. And unfortunately, what we do to the impact of one has a deep impact into the other. And seeing just the rates of mental health concerns really, really hit the radar through COVID. Certainly to me, with a long history working with chronic health concerns, and I've been around that world for a little bit, but to see it community-wide and to really start to see it put front page and center of attention, that really resonated for me as just the importance and the impact that these reasonably minor things can add up to be quite a large molehill to climb over.
And a lot of it is about burnout and stress, isn't it? Because we were in environments that we couldn't control. We had a lot of things flying at us during COVID. And I think we've got even more things flying at us as leaders post-COVID. It's a world that's changing rapidly. So, you add stress and exhaustion to that. What are some of the impacts that something like stress and exhaustion has on a human body?
Yeah, look, certainly this is really my jam. And I look around this in TBM, total body modification. One of the distinctions that's highlighted to providers is a concept known as grizzly bear. Principle around this is it's like you're running from an angry bear. The brain thinks if I never stop, I never slow down, I never have to deal with the bear that's chasing me. And this links back into part of our neurology of our on state and our off state in a very simplified way: fight, flight, freeze, rest, digest, heal. And we should oscillate in and out of these two states throughout the day. But I find that chronic stress and this constant feeling of pressure, it keeps us trapped waiting for the metaphorical pterodactyl that's never going to come.
Never going to come.
We just have this awareness all the time of where's the next stressor coming from. And this puts our body into a state of survival rather than heal, rest, digest. We need that at some point in our life. You can't operate heavy machinery, chop tomatoes with a sharp kitchen knife in off mode. You want to kind of be present. But when the proverbial threat has diminished, we should shut down again. And what I see so often is we just don't. Even at sleep, we stay stuck in this on mode all the time, and it takes its toll. It affects things like immune degradation, long-term chronic health problems like heart disease, stroke, cancer, these very end-stage illnesses where it's the final hurrah, the body's trying to get us to wake up and listen to the symptoms that it's been trying to yell at us for the last 30 years. Sleep suffers, interpersonal relationships, decision-making, cognitive thinking. I could list endless symptoms here that link back to it. But in my opinion, and certainly my clinical experience with it, this is the source, is us being able to process and live within this world. We can't eliminate stress from our lives. It's just the capacity of what we do. But it's figuring out strategic ways that we can use to help us navigate that better day by day and enjoy the ride. I mean, isn't that the goal here? We're here for 80 odd times around the sun, a little more, a little less if you're lucky. Enjoy the ride while you're here.
Yeah. And get to, like, I mean, I've got some elderly people in my life right now, and it's really interesting. They're all at different stages of their life. You know, so you have one half who have been ready to die for the last 10 years. And so that's what they've been telling themselves, and their body is slowly deteriorating. And the other half that, you know, want to live forever kind of stuff and have a very different mindset. And it's really interesting how what we tell ourselves, our mind, is how our body reacts at the end of the day. But you're right. You want to get to the end of that life being as healthy as you possibly can be. I don't want to be in a wheelchair, and I don't want to be bedridden with bed sores and have someone lift me up to go to the bathroom and toilet. You know, no, thank you.
On my last day, I'd like to be able to walk on the grass, look at the sun, and enjoy the last moments that I have, and then fall off the cliff. The inevitable will come. I'm yet to meet a person that's cheated death. But,
yes. Well, I mean, I use my dad as an example. You know, he sadly passed away in 2020, but he was 82 and he was super fit, healthy, playing golf, walking, like, you know, playing the stock market. And he literally dropped dead eating breakfast. Now, too young in my eyes. You know,
Absolutely.
My father was always going to be too young for me. But I look back on it now and I go, what a great way to go. Eating breakfast, bang, and you're gone. You wouldn't even know what hit you. Anyway, that was just a bit of a segue. I want to talk about some of the healthy habits that I've heard you talk about around this. And what I love about what you talk about is it's really simple. You know, I think sometimes in this desire to be healthy, we make it complicated and onerous. And then what happens is we do it for a period of time and then we stop, because it's impossible to keep that level of discipline all of your life. So it's really about getting into the healthy habits. And you've got 6 things, and I actually do want to talk about them in detail with you. And the first one that you talk about is hydration. And it's not about beer, wine, coffee, or tea, but it's all about water, right? So talk to us about why hydration is important and what is the best level of hydration for our body.
And again, these are principles that are foundational to TBM. And one of them, this concept of water, it is the universal medium that everything operates within in the body, and healing commences. And certainly Viktor Frankl, the founder, Doc, was a huge proponent that there was this exact amount that was required to shift waste from the body: metabolic waste, healing waste, and environmental waste, to process it from the body, in a sense, put out the trash. The reason nothing else counts, and there's a beautiful little succinct video of him online from the 1980s that you can still glean on YouTube. I think it's still up and around. But he talks about this concept that everything we put into the body requires internal water to pull it apart and metabolize it, to send the nutrients and the minerals and the chemicals, literally to pull it apart in a chemical way. And it takes water to do this. The only thing that doesn't take internal water reserves to process it is water. which is why water is considered the universal solvent. And even if you add lemon juice to water, as wonderfully beneficial as that can be, at least in TBM's view, it's no longer water. You've turned it into a food. You've added sugar, you've added minerals, you've added trace fiber elements, other things to it. It's no longer just water. So TBM's counsel to its patients is ideally just filtered tap water, drunk in a specific amount to help shift these waste elements from the body.
And we're going to talk about those specific amounts in a moment, but what is the ideal temperature of the water? Because I don't like my water too cold, but I don't like it from the tap either. It's sort of that in between. In fact, if I'm drinking alcohol, I don't even like ice in it because I just don't like the coldness. What is the ideal temperature of water that we should be drinking?
I've got a pretty good opinion on this one too. Certainly Chinese medicine would view cold internally is not desired. Chinese herbal therapy and Chinese dietary therapy counsels a lot against cold foods, the energy of cold going into us. So at a actual anatomical component, when you dump a whole lot of cold into the gut, it shrinks the blood vessels down, constricts them momentarily, and prevents absorption. So we would counsel room temperature or higher would be the preferred temperature for drinking your water. Ideally just bottled water left out of the fridge, or beg your pardon, tap water filled into a bottle left out of the fridge for portability and convenience. But I would counsel patients against drinking cold water straight from the fridge, and certainly ice water.
But you also say there's a particular or an ideal way to drink the water as well. You need to look at it. Have I got that right? You need to look at it.
I know it's bizarre.
I've got a drink bottle here. How do I do that?
And for everything that I'm sharing, I had the same skepticism the first time I heard some of these points, and I sort of parked it and had the other half of my brain go, well, give it a go and see where you go with it. But two factors that can help with the consumption of water amounts. One, look at it literally in the vessel that you're drinking from. Focus on the water inside the bottle, the glass. Even if the coating is opaque and you can't see it, visualize the water that's inside the container. And the second factor to help with consumption is a wide mouth apertured opening, like a wide mouth glass rather than a narrow necked bottle. It helps prevent sucking a lot of air with the water. So for a lot of people, when I give them specific water intake components and advice, they'll say, oh, but I get really bloated and I burp a lot and all this sort of stuff. That can really assist with that. So pouring the water, if you're measuring it from a bottle each day, to pour it into another drinking vessel, such as a glass, can really help with that.
And add a little bit of salt to it, or something that you talk about.
So not so much into the water. One of the, again, so mileage may vary. This is a moment where I'm saying I'm not a medical practitioner, but I can only work with the tenets of TBM. We strongly recommend patients do not avoid salt in their diet when they start to drink higher amounts of water, unless you've been given specific directive by a medical provider to do so, such as a cardiologist, a renal physician, someone that's advised you must have a low sodium diet. Failing that, when you start to drink higher amounts of water without salt in your diet, you can risk this electrolyte being removed from the body. Sodium is one of the first things that will wash out with higher amounts of water intake. So it must be replenished. If you don't, there's a little way that we make a gate on a cellular membrane that allows us to get water from outside a cell to inside a cell and back out again. It's called the sodium-potassium pump. And this particular gate, this special receptor, needs sodium in order to make it. So we would counsel, from the amounts that we'll talk about in a moment, to go no higher than 1 liter above this amount. Otherwise, you can risk a medical condition known as hyponatremia, which is water intoxication, too much water in, and not being able to remove it. So this is where just adding salt to taste with food, you don't need to add it to your water for clarification. You just have it in your diet, just not to go to a low sodium intake diet, as I said, unless you've been given advice to do so specifically.
And you can drink too much water, people listening to this.
You can.
You can. You actually
like anything,
can.
like the Chinese would say, find the middle path. There is definitely too much of anything, including a good thing.
Yeah. Now, tell us the magic formula in terms of how much water we should be taking in.
So it's a calculation based on body weight in kilograms. It's 43.5 milliliters multiplied by your weight in kilograms. So a 100 kilo person would need 4.3 liters, 4,300 milliliters as their minimum. If I can clarify, that is your base level minimum. Go no higher than 1 liter above that calculated amount. Again, unless advised to do so by a medical provider or a complementary health provider that's advised otherwise.
I can hear everyone doing calculations right now. What's my weight by the water? Now, a segue to this is, if you have a big night out, and we all do that from time to time, what is the what is your advice to minimize the hangover? And can you, because people say, have the water beforehand, have the water afterwards, have the water in the middle of the night. I've tried it all and I still wake up feeling like crap the next morning. Is there a way we can minimize our hangovers with water?
Yeah, drink less. Yeah.
Drink less. I knew you were going to say that.
It's a good question.
That's boring.
It is. And look, there will be nights, no doubt, that we enjoy a consumption amount. But I guess the thing for me personally, I can only speak on a personal thing. I do not believe there is any mystical hangover cure. You are suffering chronic and acute dehydration all in one, because most likely you're already starting from behind the 8 ball before you get out and have a drink or two of alcohol, and then it dehydrates us even further. So my suggestion would be, firstly, have a little bit before you head out. Doesn't have to be a massive amount, but maybe a glass or so before you head out. Council would say intersperse it throughout the evening that you're or the event that you're drinking at, to have some water throughout the event, and certainly to have some on getting home. Not a massive amount, will be up half the night getting rid of it, but have some water on getting home, and then persistently have it throughout the day on rising. Certainly for me, at my body weight, my optimum is around 3.8 litres. I'm about 3.6 is my minimum, so 3.8 to 4 litres. If I don't start that early in the day, you don't want to be drinking your larger amounts towards the evening hours. Otherwise, you will be up half the night. Input still has to have output. Yeah. So same thing for a big night out. Don't have too much before bed, but certainly hit it once you wake in the morning.
The second habit you talk about is the restriction of calories, which I love because, and I have to say, and I'm going to confess that the last time I heard you speak, which was in, where were we? We're in New South Wales together, and you talked about this, and I went and downloaded an app. I'm not going to talk about which app, I downloaded an app, and I've now become obsessed with how many calories I'm putting in my body. But I have to say, by tracking it and really understanding what each food group is putting into my body, I actually feel more empowered around the choices that I'm making, and sometimes quite horrifically surprised about, I thought that was healthy and it's not. And in other cases going, you know what, I can actually have this. So talk to us about the calorie intake into our bodies.
Sure. And again, this is just some principles that have resonated for me amongst some clinical work, but also some of my own personal, some of the actual personal journey I had with some of this. The idea here is that we make the body efficient 2 ways. You force the body to efficiency 2 ways. One is you limit the calories that you feed it to stress it. And second is exercise. And I know we get to this topic in a moment, so I'll cover that when we come to it. But with regards to caloric restriction, as an animal, we're not designed to glut all the time. We're not designed to eat breakfast at 7 a.m., have a cup of coffee at 10 a.m. with milk and sugar in it, which to us is a cup of coffee. To our brain, it's a meal. Have lunch, have an afternoon snack, have dinner, have snacks in the evening. The brain thinks, well, I'm just going to keep getting input here, so I don't have to be efficient. When we stress the body with caloric restriction, it makes us very efficient. The body tends to use everything that we put in quite efficiently, will really break it down. And in the absence of having short and medium term sugar reserves, and by sugar I mean carbohydrates here, it will go down the tier to start to burn fat for fuel. So this is where we start to get into things around ketosis and weight-driven caloric restriction forces fat to be burnt as a byproduct to create energy. So weight loss is the result here. But what I found fascinating when I looked at this in myself, and also my wife Tanj, when she and I played around with this, I tracked my blood sugar throughout this process. And it was that actually stabilized during this caloric restriction. So weight loss seems to be just the result of this. Blood sugar stabilization, hormone production stabilization, mood and emotional stabilization. Again, these are all tenets and principles that TBM would say that come back from limiting calories, helps restore part of our fight, flight, freeze, rest, digest, healing nervous system, the parasympathetic and sympathetic nervous system, to reintegrate how to work effectively again. The person that I'd done quite a bit of reading around, and he's written some fantastic material for the layperson, is a medical doctor called Dr. Michael Mosley. He's a BBC journalist who has been the advocate for the Fast 800 and the 5-2 diet. His wife, Dr. Claire, is also a nutritionist and deeply involved in the food aspects of their program, but certainly with no There's certainly no kickback or caveat or anything to that from anything that I'm saying here from this organization, but his material is amazing. And as a journo, his background is to research deeply. So his book on fasting called Fast 800, he talks a lot about the different studies and researchers that he connected to and seeing their little glimpses into the worlds they operate within and what calorie restriction does. In a broad spectrum, what it seems to allow our bodies to do is put out the garbage instead of just constantly inputting all the time and never a chance to put out the trash. So it discards old cells, it reboots immune function. There's an incredible study done by an Italian researcher called Dr. Walter Longo, who looked at severe calorie restriction in chemotherapy patients with breast cancer in particular, I believe it was. And his results were off the charts to show that the body literally has this amazing reset capacity when we stress it. With calorie restriction. So again, it's finding the middle path. Whatever you do has to be integratable into your day-to-day life. And I think that the thing I would counsel a patient to see here would be, don't see this as a short-term, I'm going to do this to get ready for my wedding or for whatever event I have coming up, or because I want to lose 3 kilos. Make it sustainable and make it part of your life. Just integrate it as part of a lifestyle adaptive change rather than a short-term, I'm doing a diet in inverted commas. See it more as a lifestyle adaptation.
You make an interesting link between eating food that closely links with your ancestry. And I love this because I'm Indian and you know, I know that when I eat Indian food, my body seems to sit with it much better than when I eat Western food. I've just recently come back from Asia and, you know, looking at the Asian diet, it's very soupy, high intake of vegetables, smaller portions of meat. And it's very healthy, very healthy. And I wonder if we swap that over for the Western diet, how their bodies would react. But tell us more about this and why this is important.
Yeah, again, look, this is a deep TBM fundamental in ancestry around diet. Eat foods from the building blocks you're made from. One of the things I'd look at in a patient commencing TBM care with me would be asking them about their ancestry origins, if they're aware of them. And we'd look back at least up to 15 generations of where do you come from? What are the building blocks you come from? So we're looking at about the last 400 or 500 years of your family tree, if you're aware of it. Ideally, for me as a white Caucasian, Anglo-Saxon derived Northern European, not many soybeans in that part of the world 500 years ago. So soy milk, soy products, unfermented soy products, my body doesn't make the enzymes required in order to break these down very well, compared to someone with an Oriental bloodline, has much better capacity to handle those foods because it's what they're built from. Certainly within the subsets of people with an Indian background, if you look at the Sikhs and people that have not had meat for hundreds, if not thousands of years, their bodies have adapted to not requiring meat to make critical nutrients. Whereas for those of us that are still only maybe a generation into veganism, vegetarianism, but have a deep history of a family background that did eat red and white meats, we may not be putting the best building blocks into our bodies. That doesn't mean you can't have a healthy diet. I must qualify that. You can obviously have a healthy diet and work within the tenets of restriction and elimination. But in regards to ancestry, the first thing I'd look at in a patient, if they're suffering some chronic health concerns and the inability for the body to work in an efficient way, is what are you eating? What are you putting in?
I love that. And it has made me a lot more conscious about what I am putting in. And you're right, my grandparents were vegetarians and, you know, the history, you know, probably 100 years ago, they were all vegetarians.
Yeah.
Meat would never have touched their mouths. And so, you know, probably, and I know that, you know, when I eat, you know, the vegetarian diet, I feel a lot healthier. I don't feel the bloated and things sitting in my system and my body. I just process it a lot better. So I do agree there's something in it. Now, I want to switch to the supplement industry because I am constantly sucked into this, and you just got to see my social media feeds to see how much advertising material I get about the latest supplement. And there was a time where, you know, I had a lot of, I talk about this in my intro about how I was working in a super high stress environment for a significant period of time, and it had an impact on my body. I got an autoimmune disease, and I remember feeling so tired, not being able to get out of bed. And so then I started to reach out for, well, what is that supplement that I can take that's going to energize me to be able to get out of bed. And again, it's $1 billion industry that's been built around this. Now, I'm not saying we shouldn't take supplements, but I think we've got to be really aware of, what are the supplements that we should be taking? And probably Facebook marketing and advertising isn't the best place to buy them. So what is your suggestion around supplements?
Yeah, look, it's a great question. And as you've said, it's such a huge industry. First point I would say is if you can, get it through a balanced diet. Lots of different food varieties, brightly colored foods, vegetables. I know we've all heard that. So again, that's just my coverall to say as a medical provider, look to your diet first and foremost. Supplements are exactly what they are. They supplement the intake requirements. So perhaps before throwing a lot of money, time, and effort at taking a huge shotgun range of supplements, figure out what your baseline is. It may be time, if you haven't had a checkup with your doctor for a while, to consider a blood test, find out the cards you're playing with, and then looking at your diet and your supplemental regime from there. But the short list I would usually suggest to a patient, again from TBM's principles, would be a high quality probiotic. 80% of our immune system is in our gut, and getting the gut microbiome and the microbiota, the colony of bugs that live within us that help us live and exist every day, really, really matters. What we're starting to see is very strong link between gut health and mental health. And that's been quite a fascinating extension there. TBM has had a thought around Alzheimer's disease as being type 3 diabetes, an inability for the brain to process sugar at a neurologic level in a simplified way. So there's definitely a link between what we feed and what happens to the rest of us. So supplementally, probiotic helps balance the gut colony. And as I said, bang for your buck matters with that. So if you can, look at a higher quality probiotic where possible. Practitioner dispensed only ranges are often a good place to start with someone like a naturopath or someone like myself in complementary healthcare. And again, if you're not sure, check with your pharmacist or your doctor. Second thing we'd counsel in TBM would be particularly for women who are entering into perimenopause, would be a good quality calcium supplement. Calcium in the diet should be around 1,200 milligrams supplementally, according to TBM's view, for the average adult. And topping it up with a good quality calcium supplement can really help with that too. The third one that I'd look at, again, more for specific around immune, and a lot of research came out during COVID with this, would be a good quality vitamin C, zinc, and vitamin D regime. There was a lot of mileage shown for those three nutrients in particular for immune resistance. And they'd be ones to keep in your sort of first aid kit in the back of the cupboard. I'd recommend that.
All right. I might have to have a clean up of the back of my cupboard now.
Yeah, look, I must admit, it's not my strong suit. You'd be better pressed to maybe ask these questions of a dietitian or a nutritionist. But certainly things for people that are into training regimes and physical fitness exercise regimes, things like creatine and all that sort of stuff can be incredible. I must admit, I just don't use them myself and I don't know a lot about them.
No.
But certainly the ones in TBM we would look at would be probiotic, calcium, water, and eating an ancestral diet from a balanced range of fruit and veggies. And generally speaking, we should operate pretty well on that.
Yeah. Let's talk about exercise. I think this is one that, is one of my favorite topics, because we all guilty of this. We start of the year, we get into the gym, we take a gym membership, and, I'm going to be there every, 4 days a week, 3 days a week. And the reality is, things get in the way. I have an allergic reaction to getting on a scale because I never like the number it tells me, so I don't get on a scale. I kind of figure if my pants gets tight, I'll put on a bit of weight. And I can be super obsessive about exercise, and I have no discipline in this area at all. But movement matters.
It does.
What are the right things to do around exercise?
So again, just this is the other half of the equation about how do we make the body efficient. You stress it by exercise, and literally at a microscopic level. You stress it by tearing it apart at a microscopic level and repairing it again. So weight-bearing exercise. By weight-bearing, that doesn't necessarily mean lifting weights. Walking is weight-bearing. Swimming is weight-bearing. Anything that uses gravity or a resistance of something to allow our muscles to work. I think the biggest thing here is, again, I would counsel a patient to consider that exercise doesn't necessarily have to be this deep commitment of throwing on Lycra, driving to a location and having to exercise 90 minutes, 5 days a week at a gym. If that's your game, for sure. But exercise can be rolling out of bed in the morning and doing 10 push-ups, and that's all you do. My counsel is do something every day. Do something that can become part of a routine. The old classical saying in Chinese medicine is, do you wash your bowl after a meal even though you're just going to get it dirty again? Hell yeah, you do. You go and wash your plate, put it away, and then bring it out next time. Do you exercise and move every day even though you did it yesterday? Yes, you do, because the human body's not designed to be sedentary. Again, if we lived thousands of years ago, 4, 5, 6,000 years ago, life would be vastly different to how we live now. If you look at the 2 million years of human evolution, we're looking at a reasonably small snippet since the industrial age that have made us become more sedentary and sit for extended periods. And we're just not designed evolutionarily to do that. So considering that to move incidentally every day, take the stairs instead of the escalator or elevator where you can. Physical housework and physical movement can be quite good rather than leaving it to an automated robot to do it for you. Awesome. Don't get me wrong. I love the tech and I love the world of all of that, but it comes at a price.
Yeah. It's interesting, isn't it? Sitting has become the new, the modern disease. And I mean, I know for myself, and I can spend a lot of time, particularly with Zoom. Like, you know, in the days we used to get up, go to an appointment, walk, have a coffee shop, or, you know, travel or whatever. And we do all this via Zoom now. But one of the things I do is if I'm talking on the phone and I can have long conversations, I actually plug myself in and I walk. So people in the office laugh at me because I could walk for half an hour. But it's amazing when you get to the end of the day, I've done 6,000, 7,000 steps without leaving the office.
That's it. And this is what I mean by incidental exercise. Just to consider that, yes, you can do it in one big chunk in the day, but it's not kind of how we're geared. We would be generally better to be a little bit active all the time. That doesn't mean that you can't have your favorite gym or your favorite thing that you like to do, long bike ride or swimming session, whatever it might be. Fantastic. But don't do it at the detriment of looking at incidental movement as well.
What are your thoughts on the concept of the 10,000 steps? Because that was quite popular at one point, wasn't it? We were all counting the number of steps. We had Fitbits and all sorts of things. Yeah. And then the opposite has come out and like you said, it's about movement, not about the number of steps. Is that right? And what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, look, again, I've seen a little bit of research around this in the last couple of years that's coming forward to say that 10,000 isn't this magical number that if we don't get there, we need to, you know, flail ourselves and beat ourselves up for not getting to this magic number. I think it's a great benchmark. I think that what it did bring around with the idea of it was that it highlighted the need for movement, and it really gave people a lodestone to aim towards for a movement activity regime. But I think that 10,000 is not necessarily the magic number. If you don't get to that, do you get no benefit for only walking 2,000 steps in the day? I don't think that that's the case. I think that like anything, like we've already discussed around water intake and diet and things, there's an ebb and a flow. There'll be days that you really can do probably double that should you choose to. And there are days that you just can't. It's just to do something every day and make that your consistency, make that your baseline, and anything above that, awesome, great bonus to it on the top of that. But to look at something every day that moves your body, that's the goal. If you think about it, I had a patient some time back and we were discussing their lifestyle. They woke up, they sat down and ate breakfast, sat in their car to get to work, sat down all day, sat in the car to get home, sat on the couch for 3 hours to watch television, went back to bed again. And this was their normal daily routine. And they wondered why they were struggling with some aspects of weight loss and metabolism concerns. And it's like, well, you're not moving at all. You're really not. So yeah, I'd throw out there for the listeners to challenge them to look at their daily routines and habits, but just to remind yourself that something you did today that you didn't do yesterday, that's the goal. Is, you know, can 5 push-ups and 5 sit-ups be a workout? Hell yeah, it can, provided you do it every day. That's your workout. If you want to do 10 times that for each of those numbers, fantastic. But get a baseline, get something that drives you every day to move.
I love that. Get a baseline. I want to switch to emotions, and this is actually related to stress. I'm super interested in this because I'm seeing a lot of leaders and management and executives suffering from this at the moment. And I, you know, I've seen that, you know, during COVID, I think people worked harder than they've ever worked before because they were at home and they were connected to work 24/7. I see leaders or, midline managers and executives today with high stress levels. And the stress levels are because, they've taken on a lot of work, or there's high expectations on work delivery. There's a lot of emotion attached to this. They're working long hours. They're not taking the regular breaks in the course of their day to disconnect and reconnect again, because disconnecting is not seen as the right thing to do in that business environment. They come home at the end of the day and they are exhausted, and they have nothing to give to their family and their partner. They don't sleep well at night because this work issue, or, the amount of work that they've got is running round and round in their head. And I'm probably describing something that hopefully our listeners are going to tick, tick, tick. I've been there. There's no prize for any of us to work till 7, 8 o'clock at night. There's no prize for working without any breaks. There's no prize for high stress, because it will break you physically and emotionally. And the impact it has on your nervous system and your health is even worse. And you talk about the breath is a way to help you regulate these emotions. So please take us through that concept. And then I want you to show us the exercise that you do, because I've done that with you before, the exercise that you do around controlling that part of, that physical reaction you have when this happens to you.
Yes. Yeah. Great question. This is a topic very close to me, this one. Certainly, again, Chinese medicine, deep connection to breath, as much as many of the indigenous medicines, chanting, breath work. Why have they persisted throughout antiquity right through to the modern age? Because we recognize there's such benefit to them. But breath is key, in my opinion. Again, in a very, very simplified way, when we inhale, not exhale or inhale, either way, a neutral breath, and then exhale, our brain neurologically does different things. And by and large, a lot of the work that I work around came from Dr. Andrew Weil, W-E-I-L. He's a medical doctor based in the, I think out of the United States now. And he looked at a lot of different breathing concepts coming out of integrative wellness care that he works with. And one of them is called 4-7-8 breathing. Now, I'm sure many of you listeners and audience members have heard of this before, but for those of you that haven't, in a very simplified way, you inhale for a 4 count, you hold your breath for a 7 count, and you exhale for an 8 count. What we seem to realize now, with more and more research being done around box breathing and different breathing patterns and all this type of stuff, is that so if inhale is this long and exhale is this long, when they're even, our brains are in an even regulation of this sympathetic, parasympathetic nervous system integration, the fight, flight, freeze, rest, digest, rest, digest, heal. When you exhale for twice as long as you inhale, so to say that again, when you exhale for twice as long as you inhale, you're bringing up the parasympathetic, calming, shutdown nervous system. You're increasing it, dialing down and bringing up the other one. So to deal with a stress state of mind, it allows calming and regulation to return. You feel your blood pressure change. Certainly things like heart rate adapts and changes, and all the things that happen to us when we're stressed just all start to settle down here. So the good doctor talks about on his website and in his own podcasts and information, for people commencing work with this, if you're new to doing any type of breath work, do not do any more than 4 rounds of what we're about to do. You can use it multiple times in a day, but in any one sitting, do no more than 4 rounds of this. He goes into good detail on his own site about this, and I won't get into that now, but it's to do with oxygenation levels in the blood and all that type of stuff. So just for clarity, 4 rounds. So 4-7-8 breathing. Would you like to go through it now?
Yeah, let's do it. Let's do it together.
So, firstly, all breathing is done through the abdomen. For those of you that are not aware of what that is, it's just deeply connecting down into the abdominal zone when you inhale and using the diaphragm to breathe. If you're having trouble locating this or working with it, you can place your hands like this on your tummy, just below your belly button. And when you inhale, you'll feel your fingertips spread a little bit and then reconnect as you exhale. And that lets you know you're breathing down diaphragmatically into the tummy here, rather than upper chest breathing and that sort of shallow, stressed breathing. So we want to make it abdominal breathing. Secondly, the tongue stays in connection with the roof of the mouth. Right in the highest point of the palate is a little ridge line, and you want to put the tip of your tongue on that ridge line. This connects to energetic circuits in Chinese medicine, known as the microcosmic orbit, and it's a beautiful energetic connection that allows this to work really well. Thirdly, we're going to inhale through the nose and exhale through the mouth for this exercise, but you also want to keep the tongue connected to the roof of the mouth during exhalation as well. So you're breathing around your tongue. If you're running out of breath, the key here seems to be how much do you suck in for the 4 count to make sure you've got enough for the 8 count, is to purse the lips a little bit. So as you exhale, slows the breath down a little bit and gets you through the 8 count a little more comfortably as well. And just a bit of practice, like anything, this will come more easily. So you can keep eyes open, eyes closed. There's no right or wrong to that. So I'll move through an example of me doing a couple of rounds, and then we can work with that. So nice, comfortable, relaxed position, inhaling through the nose, hold, exhaling. Inhaling, hold, exhaling.
So you're inhaling for 4, holding for 7, exhaling for 8.
Out for 8. There's no right or wrong with it. Everyone's count may vary a little bit depending on their size, their frame, their lung capacity, but you find your rhythm with it. You can do it sitting in any position, so it's particularly effective. I must admit, with blessings to my mother, the first time I ever heard about this was from my mum. She'd come across it online some years back, and I heard it from her. And she said, it will guarantee to put you back to sleep at night if you wake up in the middle of the night. And I said, come on, Mum, that's a big call. Come on. She goes, no, give it a go. So sure enough, I tried it. I was out like a light within a couple of rounds of doing it. I've never, personally for me, I've never had it fail to kick me back to sleep again. So you can do it lying on your side. You don't have to be, in a seated position or anything like that. But it's pretty effective. The beautiful thing with it is you can do it on the go. For leaders about to head into a charged meeting, if you're sitting there in the wings waiting to go, you can sit there, take a few moments to breathe and connect, and it can really assist with that. One of the things my lovely other half Tanja talks about in her world is when emotion is high, intelligence is low. When intelligence is high, often our emotions are dialed down a little bit. We want to fluctuate in this lovely little scene. But if you can think about it, if we're in a very, very charged emotional framework, we're not making the best decisions with our intellectual brain. For leaders and for people that work at the heads of teams and heads of industry, surely this is a critical thing to have your ducks in a row when you're trying to stay in a cognitive capacity of helping marshal the troops and be a leader that's the lodestone for others to work towards. As I said, this neat little breathing technique, I've got a lot of mileage from it personally over the years, along with my patients, and I'd invite people to give it a go. For more information, as I said, Dr. Andrew Weil, W-E-I-L, has some amazing information around this as the proponent and founder of this breathing technique.
And one of the other things you talk about is how we take charge of our emotion and do the reset, because that's all part of it. The stress levels creates emotion, and we can get really cranky and stressed out and all that sort of stuff. So how do I take charge of that? And there's another little exercise that you've shared with us and I've done it that as well. But maybe if you could share that in terms of how do I take charge of this emotional moment, including the breathing. So we've done the breathing. Let's do the other one.
The other one, again, comes from TBM. It's a technique called basic emotion. Now, normally a practitioner would apply this to the patient directly and work with it, but this is a segue into using this as an individual performing it on themselves. This has to do with, when I say controversial, there's been some studies around to show that this may not exactly be the way that it was initially framed, but that we have 3 brain layers. We have a reptilian brain, then a mammalian or limbic emotional brain, and then our neocortex, our thinking rational brain. And it's the limbic brain we're working with in here, the emotional brain. These different brain states activate when our spines are in different positions. So when we lie face down in a prone position, we're in our reptilian brain. In a curled fetal position, we're in the limbic emotional brain. And when we're in an upright standing position, we're in the neocortex thinking brain. So for this to work, just if I can turn side on a little, you want to curl the head and spine a little bit here. We want to be in a slightly curled position. Taking 2 fingers or any fingers of the hands, we're going to look at these 2 zones just above the eyebrows on the forehead. There's two little hollows right above the eyebrow ridge lines in line with the pupils that we're activating onto these points. And you must cross your hands for this to work. So touching with two fingers, or a finger, I like to use a couple here, just index and middle fingers, touching into these two little depressions, curling forwards a little bit, inhaling through the nose and exhaling through the mouth. Again, you can keep the tongue to the roof of the mouth, but it's not mandatory for this. Inhaling through the nose, exhaling through the mouth. Long, deep abdominal breaths. Do at least 3 rounds of this. You can do more if you choose, but 3 rounds. And again, this is a lovely emotional reset. And just so people are clear, this doesn't remove the stress of why you're in a triggered state. I do not have a magic bullet for that, unfortunately.
Nobody
That's
does.
therapy, that is counseling, that is a whole different beast that we could talk about around that. But to take the charge off the emotional feeling and what it's doing to you, the sweaty palms, the rapid breathing, the increased breathing state that brings on that feeling of shoulders up around the ears, that can be settled with this technique quite beautifully. So again, if you're heading into a challenging meeting, or say for, certainly when I had another lifetime in a window working as a leasing agent in real estate, heading into a challenging conversation with a tenant and a client, I found this quite useful to try. And it's a beautiful, simple little technique. But as I said, it's not a magic bullet. There's still the beast to deal with behind that. And that's, I guess the bigger picture is, where do we start to process and regulate the causation of why we feel this way? But to take the feeling away from it, to get us back on track again, it's a neat little trick.
I want to finish this on sleep, because it's so critical. And I know when I have a bad night's sleep, it takes me days to recover, and then I get stressed because I'm not sleeping, and I get high levels of anxiety because I'm not sleeping, because I know I'm going to have a, crap couple of days. How do I get to have myself at least 6 hours of sleep a night? Because it's so important for your body.
It is. And again, like it or lump it, as human beings, as animals, we need sleep. You cannot function without sleep. Eventually you pay the piper there. So firstly, my suggestion for people struggling with this is get routinized with your day-to-day life. If you're going to bed at 9 p.m. one night and 4 a.m. the next night, and you're out of kilter, your brain just doesn't understand where the line in the sand is here. When is it meant to be shutting down and starting to switch down and switch off? The second thing here, there's been a lot of work done around blue wavelength light. So if you do wake up in the middle of the night and pick up your phone or your tablet or turn on the television, you're reinforcing the wake up mechanism of the brain. And this comes back to hormonal regulation of exposure to daylight. Again, as animals, if we lived outside the advent of electric light sources, we'd go to bed when the sun fell and rise when the sun rose. More time in summer to be up and awake, less time in winter in the shorter months. Again, think more Northern European here, where it gets dark at 3, 4, 5 o'clock in the afternoon. And in summer, it could be light right up until 9:30, 10 o'clock at night. So with this, regulate your sleep and wake cycles. Try to go to bed around the same time every night, within about half an hour of that time frame, and wake around the same time every morning. Now, the cool thing with this is your brain doesn't understand the difference between a Sunday morning and a Tuesday morning. Whether you like it or not, my invitation is still keep to that routine. Even if the temptation to sleep in is there, set an alarm and still wake. Whether you choose to lie in bed and drift again, no problem, but reinforce to your brain the wake up time. To help with that, avoid flat screen technology about 90 minutes to an hour before going to sleep or wanting to go to sleep. Reading a book from a book or a Kindle style tablet that has LCD screens rather than backlit screens, and just a regular reading light can be pretty good for that if you're still wanting to keep the brain active, but start to dial it down. Make sure that your body's actually prepared for sleep. And by that, I mean sleep hygiene, that your room temperature is a little cooler rather than a little warmer, that you have the room as dark as possible, obviously as quiet as possible. Certainly, I think that there's stock into having at least some semblance of tidiness and order in the room, so it reflects a tidiness and order in the mind, that the bedding is clean and not heavily soiled, that type of stuff. It all matters. And finding that routine with it. And once in bed, certainly the 4-7-8 breathing can be very, very effective to help turn the running mind off. And the second tip that we use in Chinese medicine, right behind the ear, from the lobe of the ear, right at the base here is a little peak of bone called the mastoids, the mastoid tips on the skull. Right on the bottom of these 2 points, and again, I don't know if people can see here, but just in from behind the earlobe, you creep around, there's a little peak of bone just behind the earlobe area there. At the base of these are 2 Chinese medicine acupoints called anmian, translates to mean peaceful sleep. You can rub these 2 little points for about 30 seconds to a minute to help stimulate, again, a wind down part of the brain to put you back to sleep. So 4-7-8 breathing and mastoid rubbing. On waking, one of the TBM techniques that we use here to reinforce that the brain is now ready to wake and start to produce hormones to keep us awake is an energy circuit reset called Energy Circuit 2. On your desired wake-up time, not if you wake at 3 in the morning, do not do this technique at 3 a.m. But if you want to wake at 6 a.m., set an alarm. If you're already awake, stay in bed until this desired time, preferably before your feet touch down on the left-hand rib cage. Just sit up a little so people can see me here. Just on the sideline of the body from armpit to hip bone on that sideline, about halfway. In men, this is the base of the pectoral muscles. In women, about where the bra would cross the torso here. You brush in the 6th, 7th rib interspace lightly for 30 seconds on the left-hand side of the rib cage. Once you've completed that, along the ear margin here, this outer crease of the ear called the helix, you roll it open, just stretching open that little cartilage crease. There's a huge number of acupoints on the ear alone. What we're doing here is stimulating some of these down the outside edge of the ears. Doesn't matter whether you work from top to bottom, as long as you cover the entire spread along the ears here. So left-hand rib cage for 30 seconds, followed by both ears. This resets an energy circuit in TBM that tells us to wake up. Its nickname is TBM caffeine. It's a neat little technique to help regulate sleep-wake cycles, and done over a few mornings really starts to get the brain patterned to wake up at this desired time, rather than that sort of lulled, heavy state where you're feeling like you're running through treacle for the first half hour of the day. So to knock out 4-7-8 breathing and mastoids, and to wake up, Energy Circuit 2.
Just on that, Matt, what about things like, taking magnesium before you go to bed and listening to, apps like Headspace and meditation, etc.? Are there other things that I can add to my routine?
Yeah, look, I think it's a great question. Certainly magnesium can be amazing at nighttime, but I have had patients not benefit that much from it. And again, I think people's mileage varies, and my invitation here for people is just try yourself and see what works for one person may not work for another. So really, as you've already identified with some of the other things we've spoken around, things around diet and stuff, evaluate for yourself and see how you're going with it. Certainly, I'd steer clear of artificial sources of getting us to sleep, like melatonin supplementation, or certainly things like temazepam and Valium supplementation. You're sedating rather than allowing the brain to hit a natural regulated state. Thrown into that, making sure the body is actually tired as well as the mind. So this is where exercise with routine also really matters, with, in a sense, wearing us out enough to have the body need to sleep and reset again. As far as things to specifically take at bedtime, nothing particularly comes to mind here for me. I would look at more the aspects of avoiding stimulation late into the evening of things like caffeine, black tea, coffee, even vitamin B, particularly B6 supplementation, can be quite sparky for some people neurologically. So just being aware of that. If you're drinking a cup of tea at 8 o'clock at night and then wondering why you got the jitters and can't sleep 2 hours later, that may be your answer. Yeah. So again, just evaluating what works for you, but by and large, what seems to really benefit most is routine, sleep hygiene. So temperature, environment, light levels, all that sort of stuff. And routine, getting the brain set up to realize there's almost like a metronome of sleep now, wake now, sleep now, wake now, which is why jet lag can be so punishing when you're out of that routine. The brain is just so discombobulated with where it's meant to be in space and time.
Matt, thank you so much. It's been just such an awesome conversation. I could talk to you forever. But before I let you go, please tell our listeners, how can they connect with you if they want to do any work with you or bring you into their business for coaching and presenting? Because I think what you're talking about, we need to be sharing with everybody in our businesses. I've seen you present. You do a fabulous job at, showing people on how to do this. So how do we contact you?
Oh, thank you so much, Sutton. It's been such an honor and pleasure to be company today. Certainly, people can reach out to me at our website. It's thealchemicway.com, or certainly can email me directly. It's just matt@thealchemicway.com. And certainly welcome to reach out, email, send smoke signals, get in touch. It would be an absolute pleasure to connect with people, and if there is some inquiry to be had, to find a path that we can work together, or certainly just connect and find out where people are at. But those would probably be the two best ways: to check out our website and then links either for me on that or email me directly.
Wonderful. And for our listeners, we will have a video of this linked in the show notes, because Matt has shown us all the wonderful exercise I'm sure you'll all be wanting to do, rubbing your ears, stroking your, the left side of your ribs and those bones behind the back of your ears, etc. So Matt's given us some fabulous tips. So we will put a video link of this in our show notes. Matt, have a wonderful day. Enjoy your wonderful property. It looks amazing in the background.
Thank you so much.
I look forward to coming and visiting you in Tangier soon.
Thanks so much, Sadna. See you soon.
If you like what you've heard, please share, rate and review this podcast. And don't forget to share this with anyone who might benefit from hearing it. The producer of Future Fit Leadership is Maritza Barone from Guide Your Light Network. If you would like to reach out to me, please DM me on any of the social media platforms. I'm available for speaking at conferences or consulting in your business. Future Fit is created in partnership with Future Leadership, a capability ecosystem for boards and executives. If you'd like to join the community and receive a free takeaway each week, sign up to the Future Exchange app in my show notes. Thank you for having me in your space.
This is a Guide Your Light Network production, creating podcasts with purpose.